Excellent. Welcome all again. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are here to share some information about the Shoreline Adaptation Engagement effort here in Corte Madera, and more specifically on the Marina Village area. So I'm Dave from the consultant team. You'll get to see most of the project team here today as we move through the presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. As I just mentioned, we have a large team that's helping navigate this process. Many members of city staff, including RJ, Phoebe, and Amy, who you'll get a chance to meet here as we go through the presentation today, and a consultant team helping with this engagement effort, just to make sure that we're doing a great job with outreach and having many opportunities for you all to plug in and give us your great input as we navigate this process. And you'll hear more about some of the engagement we've done to date and what we have planned moving forward. So we're going to start with just a very simple welcome overview, which we've kind of already jumped into here. And then we do have a presentation for you all, really diving into all of the activity that's gone around this shoreline adaptation effort, the studies that have been done, the engagement efforts that we've done to date, and what we have planned, and speak a little bit about the vulnerabilities that we know of in the area. And then most importantly, we're going to leave plenty of time for you all to answer any questions or comments that you might have before we talk about next steps in the process.
All right, thank you, Dave and Rachel, for starting us off. So before we get into the presentation, I do want to recognize a couple of our Flood Board members are here in attendance tonight, so thank you all for joining. And I'll start the presentation by giving a quick overview of the Shoreline Adaptation Engagement effort, which started in fall 2023. So next slide, please, Dave. All right, this effort is really aiming at providing shoreline residents and other stakeholders, including business owners, with updated information about flood risks, both now and in the future, as well as providing the opportunity for everyone who's impacted by those flood risks to share their ideas, their concerns, and their needs with town staff and leaders. So we're really focusing on listening here with this effort, and we want to hear from you all some more this evening after this presentation. And the ultimate goal of this effort is to decide as a community on what those next steps should be to address flood risks in our shoreline neighborhoods moving forward. So working with the community and town council to set those next steps. And next slide. So the outline, the area that we're focusing on for this engagement effort is shown on the map here. The outline is roughly aligned with the FEMA 100-year floodplain in this part of town, and the 100-year flood is defined as a flood that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. This area is at low elevation, so it's a priority for that reason, being in the floodplain, as well as due to some current flood impacts that occur in some parts of this area. But we do know that even within this section of town, that's all within the FEMA 100-year floodplain, there are different risks and vulnerabilities related to flooding. And that's what we've been starting to hear as well through this engagement effort. And that's why we're holding two different workshops, one focused on Marina Village and one focused on Mariner Cove. And re-engaging with this area was also identified as a key next step in the 2021 climate adaptation assessment, which RJ will be talking about a bit more. So I'll pass it over to him to talk about the town's previous work studying flood risks.
Great, thanks, Phoebe. Thanks for having me. RJ Suko, Director of Public Works and Town Engineer. So I wanted just to touch on some of the efforts that have happened kind of further in the rearview mirror. We've had several town-wide storm drainage master plans that have looked at just flooding risk in general across the town. County did a marine shoreline vulnerability assessment back in 2017. The town also did a Marina Village levee study in 2017 that looked at the existing flood berm there adjacent to the marsh on the north end of Marina Village. And many of you might be familiar with some of the efforts that were going on with the climate adaptation assessment, which really was a 2.5-year effort that spanned from 2019 through midway through 2021. And one of the comments that we heard as we finished up the climate adaptation assessment effort was that there was a desire from the community for the town to re-engage and reset the communication and just really try to have more dialogue with the residents before kind of marching forward. I think some of our the ways that we noticed the meetings didn't reach as many people as we hoped, and so we've definitely made a concerted effort to ramp that up. We've added some different strategies with A-frame signs around town. We did do a mailer for this workshop, and we have had several smaller, more intimate pop-ups, really just to have more of those one-on-one and small group gatherings to really connect with our community. But as we started this kind of reset effort in fall, that's when we had these additional workshops. We've discussed it with our flood control board as well. And we're about 2/3 of the way through. We'll be holding a separate workshop for Mariner Cove. And then as we wrap things up, we'll be putting out a mailer to our shoreline neighborhoods that has a survey included for kind of really just to formalize any feedback that people have on this process. Thank you. So here are some of the events. Mentioned, December we had a very productive and fairly well attended flood board meeting that went really well. We held a king tide pop-up event, which was an opportunity during the day for people to show up at 2 different sites, one in Marina Village, one in Mariner Cove, to actually see the king tide and kind of that water surface elevation with respect to the flood berm here in Marina Village, and also with respect to several homes and the roadway over on Golden Hind. And then we have this opportunity today here with this virtual workshop. This is just a photo from our January 10th King Tide pop-up. Phoebe can confirm, but I believe during this event it was a king tide of I think 6.7 feet elevation. So a good measuring point to just understand where we are today in our kind of most formable tides. And some of the comments that were raised were there were some people that have already experienced some level of flood or flood damage. There were concerns that with adding to the existing berm infrastructure, that would that impact views, so that certainly something that and or privacy. Separately, there was support to look at this as a potential phased approach, and is there a way to elevate the berm more moderately and do it more than once over time, instead of just really putting in a big protection measure all at once. And then overall, just there was a lot of appreciation for our more recent efforts and really making an effort to try to reach more people in our community. So now we're going to go into some of the vulnerabilities that we're aware of here at Marina Village. So one of the things that really came out of the climate adaptation assessment was not only was there's something to consider with respect to sea level rise, but really settlement in particular in these neighborhoods actually plays an equal or greater role, given many of these neighborhoods were built over thick layers of bay mud, and bay mud does settle over time. And in some cases, the settlement is occurring more rapidly than some of the projected sea level rise. So, overall, we want to keep an eye on both factors, but even if one's view is not supportive of some of the sea level rise forecasts, it definitely would encourage you to understand just kind of the vulnerabilities with respect to settlement alone. Next slide, please. So back in 2019, the county and Golden Gate National Recreation Area performed some LiDAR aerial surveys. And so they've prepared this data that gives us elevations of our various topography all over Marin County. And so if you refer to the legend here in the bottom left corner, using the color coding, it tells you about the elevations in those color coded locations. And these are based on known survey datum, NAVD 88. And so what you can see when we look at Marina Village compared to, say, Mariner Cove is it is much lower. And that's because the way it was constructed is a different approach than the way Mariner Cove was constructed. So Marina Village was left at a lower elevation, but the levee or berm that was constructed around it was the mechanism to protect it from tidal influence and other factors. As it rains, water does go into storm drains, and that goes to a retention basin through gravity pipes, and then it's then pumped out to shoreward marsh. You can see the purple circle. This is one location that we have surveyed and that we know is one of the relative low spots on the berm, and this is at 8.3 feet. And so, knowing where tides are at, sometimes, 7 or even a little bit above 7, 7.2-ish. There's not a whole lot of additional freeboard at that location. And then we also know that we've discovered as part of this process that there are some other locations that also are low spots and are vulnerable, and that such as this one here in the red oval, where we observed the water surface elevation 10 to 12 inches below the levee there at one of our king tide pop-ups. So these are areas that we think need further analysis and really are going to be things to keep an eye on as we move this discussion forward. As we look at Mariner Cove, you can see a lot of different colors. We're seeing a lot of greens, orange, and reds representing 7, 8, 9, 10 feet in elevation, so much higher. This was a high fill development, but there is no defined levee. So they built up the whole area instead of just building up a berm around it. So just two different approaches. And so they just have different characteristics and have, as a result, have different vulnerabilities. I mentioned earlier there was a 2017 levee study. So this is just showing what that looked at. It kind of broke down this northern portion of the Marina Village berm or levee into various segments, and it went into some level of geotechnical and engineering analysis about what would be feasible and what that might cost. And so we do have some preliminary information there. As mentioned before, Marina Village levee does flow through gravity pipes and your typical storm drain systems to this retention basin here, which is this square or trapezoid, and then a pump station pushes it all the way to shoreward marsh. And so the system is reliant on that retention basin not being inundated with water and the pump stations to work. What that study did not do was really do further analysis to the south which we believe there are also some areas that need to be evaluated. Next slide. So this is December 13th at one of the at a 7.32 tide. This is at that purple circle from before, that northern part of the levee. And if you didn't have the sandbags, which we've put there as a temporary protection measure, I believe it was right around 15 or so inches, or 12 to 15 inches of protection. Our survey actually is right about a foot. Our survey actually said it was at 8.3. So all that's saying is that there is some consistency between what we're seeing with our official survey work and what we're seeing, you know, in real life when we look at these flood levels. As we did those observations, we also said, well, what if we project that levee back to the cul-de-sac, back to the roadway, what would that height be? And so we took some laser level approximations, and that red mark, that red line on that sign is about equivalent as the height of the berm at that location. So meaning without the berm, and if the berm ever did breach or fail, that is potentially where the water surface elevation could rise to in an extreme event. Separately, there was a neighborhood hosted public meeting open to the public on February 9th. We looked at 2 properties at 9 Harbor Drive and 19. That's closer to Paradise Drive on the San Clemente Creek side. And, similar observations. The data came in, it was roughly a 7.5 or 7.59 tide at that time. And, there was right around 10 or so inches of freeboard between the water and the tops of those levees behind those homes. So as mentioned, that was a slightly newer discovery for town staff in an area that we would want to prioritize further evaluating if we were to kind of proceed with further efforts.
All right, so given those vulnerabilities that RJ has just covered, it's clear that there's some risks in this area. We wanted to give a preview this evening of a tool we've been working on to help visualize what flooding could look like in shoreline neighborhoods under some different scenarios, and really address that question of under what scenarios might we expect our current flood defenses to overtop. So some of you may have seen visualizations of sea level rise impacts in Stinson Beach. Those are created by a company called Virtual Planet in partnership with Marin County. So we've been developing a similar tool with Virtual Planet, which is an organization that takes 2D flood modeling and projects it onto drone images and 3D models to help communities visualize flooding impacts. So in addition to being used at Stinson Beach here in Marin County, it's also been used in Santa Cruz and Long Beach, as well as in other states across the country. So we're going to preview a few of the images that we've been working on with them tonight, and then the full tool as well as a video component will be available to everyone in the coming weeks as we get those finalized.
And so before we show some of those visualization tools and renderings, we just want to provide a little background on where this modeling and this data comes from. So this tool is based on the Cosmos model, which was created by the United States Geological Survey. And they have a very highly complex model. It factors in wind direction, tides, water flow direction. It takes into account, creek flow into the bay, so many factors. And so, we aren't here to recreate that. Rather, we're here to use that information, but then showcase it in a slightly more sophisticated visual way. That program also uses a mean high water datum, and we've been able to use NOAA data to basically translate that so it's more relatable to our residents by comparing it, finding a way to correlate it to a king tide. So next slide, please. So this is just available data on the NOAA website, and it shows, you know, for these different datums, you know, whether they're used for these models or tide charts or your typical surveys, it shows how to translate them from one datum to the other. So without getting into the numbers, you know, we were able to correlate the Cosmos model of mean high so that we can compare, you know, basically apples to apples. So we'll have this information posted publicly so people can review it at a later date. I'm happy to answer some questions if anyone wants to get into the details of this, but just want to provide some background as we get ready to show the model itself.
Great, thanks, RJ and Phoebe. So Phoebe, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you now to share the tool.
Great. Thanks, Dave. So can you all see my screen now?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so this is the draft viewer, and as mentioned, this will be available to the public once it's finalized. We're still working out a few of the details. So this initial image that you come to is a sort of normal high tide today. So this is a drone image that was taken of Corte Madera at about a 5.8 foot tide. So here you can see Marina Village, there's San Clemente Creek, there's the marshes, there's the bay. If you pan over, it's a 360 image, so you can see Highway 101 and the rest of Corte Madera. So this is what a sort of standard high tide looks like today. And then we can go up to the next step on the scale, which is a king tide.
Great. So I think for folks that have, you know, been in Corte Madera, visited Corte Madera, lived in Corte Madera for a while, this is, you know, probably not a shock. It's, you know, I think looks pretty accurate, consistent with what we see, you know, at least a few times a year. So this is your king tide, and so everything is, you know, at this level, it's functioning as we would want, in that water is where it's supposed to be. But as noted before, you know, these levees were constructed, you know, in the 50s. They've been subject to settlement, and then obviously, you know, that's before you even take into account storms and potential sea level rise. So as we look at the next scenario, you know, I think you're going to see what is a more dramatic scene in that that protection level is not able to hold the water and the tides back. So let's share that now.
So this is a king tide plus a 20-year storm on top of that. So a 20-year storm is a rainfall event that has a 5% chance of occurring every year. And this is the Cosmos model's representation of a king tide plus a 20-year storm. So both of those events combined at the same time.
So pretty dramatic difference. I think what is, you know, a big reason that it went from the king tide to this is, you know, the levee that we have now that's currently there reached a point where it was breached or overtopped at, you know, likely one of those low spots that we're aware of. And that basically let bay waters into areas that are low, that without the levee protecting them, you know, creates inundation, flooding, and likely damage. And I think we should continue to pan to the left, just because I think it's important to understand. I mean, this really has the potential to shut down Highway 101 and other parts of Corte Madera. And, you know, I think also showing, when we were talking about some of the photos earlier, and some of the elevations we were showing, you know, those were water surface elevations on, you know, sunny days, not, you know, in the midst of a storm. So just another thing to consider as we evaluate our risk and vulnerabilities.
All right, I'll stop sharing my screen and we can head back to the presentation.
Great, thank you, Phoebe and RJ. So as we mentioned, most important part of today's meeting is to give you all space to ask any comments or have any comments or questions that you might want addressed, and we'll try our best at the meeting here today to go ahead and address those. I'm hoping you could see my screen now. Just want to make sure, as we do at every public meeting in Corte Madera, is we want to create a safe and inclusive space. We want to make sure that these meetings don't get disruptive. So just to follow normal protocol, we just ask that you all be respectful with your comments as we move into this space. So I'm actually going to go ahead and stop sharing screen again. Just wanted to bring that up and then ask if you do have a comment or question, if you want to use the hand raise feature. Again, that's at the toolbar at the bottom of your window. It could be hidden in the three dots to the right. And then we can go ahead and unmute you and give you an opportunity to contribute. I do see a couple questions that have come through chat as well, or at least one question that maybe we can address here up front, and then Scott will come to you next. It looks like Robert asked, how many feet of storm surge for a 20-year storm do we anticipate? RJ, do you want to take that question?
Sure. So good question, Bob. And we I wanted to get to the root of that as well. So we actually were lucky to have a meeting with USGS to ask that question. And the answer is their model is so complex that it depends where you are. But where we were showing the purple circle kind of toward the north, they were estimating about 1.5 feet of storm surge, whereas on the interior side of San Clemente, down where we had more of the oval, they were estimating closer to a half a foot. So it's just based on, you know, the dynamics of their models and all the things. But good question.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And Sachi also noted that it might be helpful to have the feet marked on the water level. So we could look into that too as we start to develop some of these tools. So Scott, I see your hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute, and then feel free to contribute. Welcome.
Oh, hi. So I did have flooding. I've been here about, how many years did I decide? 50 years. And it's been a lot better with I know they installed a lot of floodgates. But my question would be, if you could briefly speak to the potential solutions that you're considering.
Yeah, thank you. So as mentioned, there's been prior work done, prior to even the climate adaptation assessment. There was a levee study done, and that focus was really on fortifying, strengthening the existing levee, and then potentially raising it in its current alignment. So when we're talking, and this is all specific to Marina Village. So something, as we've gone through this process, in particular, over the fall and into now, based on, some of the past information, but also based on some of these more recent observations and discoveries, staff has, elevated its level of concern. And I think based on what the mapping tool and other tools are showing us, we did apply to FEMA for a grant that would potentially fund the bulk of design and more public outreach and environmental compliance to look at strengthening and raising the berm. So that is the kind of most obvious solution for Marina Village, but certainly we're open to other ideas that meet the goals of the community.
And what that's considered an earthen, like the earthenware dams that are built. It's like an earthenware. Earthen.
Yeah, so,
It's earth.
yeah, and this, it gets more into it. If you read that preliminary study from 2017, you know, you can only, you know, stack earth so vertical before it wants to move. So
Yeah.
at a certain point, they looked at some other strategies in combination with the berm, putting, you know, like concrete blocks and kind of building them up at the top. So blocks on both sides and kind of using that to build it up. We would consider even sheet piles and to again get it higher. And then with anything, we would also look at ways to add green infrastructure. So if we did do something that was more of a gray infrastructure improvement, is there a way that we can also add green infrastructure to you know, make it more ecologically friendly, and you know, some of those options.
You mean like green, like plants?
You know,
Green,
more.
when you say green.
Yeah, no, it's more like
No.
some of the, you know, we were working with San Francisco Estuary Institute back in from 2019 to 2021, and they've done a lot of work here in this area of Corte Madera Marsh, and they thought that things like a coarse beach or a ecotone slope could be possible options. We can share information on some of those, but they're also in the climate adaptation assessment, or climate adaptation assessment document. If you're able to open that up to that.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand. I didn't really understand what you just said. They were words that I don't know, so that's okay. I mean, you get into the details, but
sure.
Thank you for that. I know it's a big job, and I am in the Harbor Drive situation, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your question and for contributing. Anyone else would like to have a question? Yes, Bob, I see your hand raised. Going to go ahead and ask you to unmute. Welcome.
Yeah, looking at that low spot on a Marina Village levee, that's continuous with the levee that goes all the way up to Corte Madera Creek. And while that's the lowest spot, I think some of the other areas are going to need to be raised in the future. Could we look at a plan that would raise everything up to a certain level, and so we would have that in place? We'd want to do the Marina Village project first, but then as material or money was available, raise the other parts of the levee going towards the north.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bundy. So, you know, really first I want to just speak to the previous work done at the climate adaptation level. That was what I would view as a long-term planning document. Really where we're at now is, you know, what are the short-term needs and vulnerabilities, and, you know, we can define what timeline makes sense, but, you know, somewhere in the, you know, 25-year range, you know, we want to be actively thinking about and potentially designing and potentially implementing. And so given this type of work is expensive, you know, it'd be great if we could just solve everything all at once. And I don't, I think certainly we can start planning. But I think we're at a stage where there's enough here to look at implementation or design or further analysis of these types of specific projects. One being, you know, fortifying and or raising Marina Village berm and levee.
So, Amy, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks all for being here tonight. We just wanted to give you a little primer on what is happening next. So we do have another pop-up workshop, sorry, not a pop-up, a Zoom workshop happening. And so please put the word out for that, but we will continue to have conversations with the community over the next couple of months. And then in late spring or so, we'll hope to conclude and compile everything that we've heard and put that back out to you all so you can review. And then we'll have another conversation with our decision makers about what we as a community want to do as far as next steps. And next slide, please. And then this is actually a new tool that we're going to be launching on our website. So we're giving you just a little preview of what that's going to be. But we have a mapping tool, so you can actually add comments in specific locations about flooding impacts, points of interest that you want us to know about. If you have photos that you'd like to share, you can do that as well. So we will send out an email blast when this gets launched on our website, but we're actually going to have the ability for you to be able to see what everyone else's comments are as well, and really just build information from you all about what you're seeing in your neighborhood or on the ground. And with that, if you want to sign up for more information, you can do so on our website. We also have FAQs on our website, a lot of other resources. And then we also have a dedicated email for this project, so you can reach us that way as well. But please make sure to sign up so you're getting our emails about next steps and upcoming workshops.
Thanks, Amy. And the mapping tool is actually live on our website now. So if you have additional comments you want to share, we can keep the conversation going, and you can, yeah, Rachel just put the link in the chat to our webpage, so you can go check out the mapping tool and please contribute.
Great. Yeah, so I just wanted to loop back again to see if there might be any other questions or comments. It still looks like there are about 20 participants still here with us. Yep, I see your hand raised. Feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself. Welcome back.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the berm that's behind the homes on Harbor that keeps San Clemente Creek from flooding Marina Village. Looks like there are about 10 homes that have that berm behind their house. I would imagine this would require a permitted process that would involve all of the homes that the town would need to get the permit for, and then find out how to implement that and pay for it. Is my understanding correct on that?
So yeah, a couple different things that, we could consider is, do we try to get something in on a temporary measure as soon as we can? Something like what we've done with the sandbags over on the north side, which would, buy us some more time for a permanent solution. So that would kind of be the first thing is, we're going to do that short term plus something later. But nonetheless, yeah, certainly a lot of things to figure out. The town hasn't historically maintained that levee berm. It was constructed by the original developer. The underlying property itself is private, so it would involve a lot of coordination, discussions with those impacted property owners, and so hard to answer in specifics exactly everything, but we're interested to hear from you if that is something the town should prioritize and working toward. I think the other one, if we don't have any other questions, I have one that I know I've heard a couple times, and I have a exhibit that I was going to share just on dredging. So I have it up, Phoebe, unless you also have it up.
Yeah, I can pull it up for you.
Okay. And we'll come back to David here in a moment. So, over the course of our recent work, but also the work in the climate adaptation assessment, there's been questions of, hey, well, can we just dredge to, solve or address our vulnerabilities to sea level rise? And, here's just a reason why that, would not be an effective measure or effective approach. So again, this is just an illustration. It's not to scale, but we've got the San Francisco Bay that is, relatively shallow, but it connects to the Pacific Ocean, which has endless amounts of volumes of water. And this table really just shows the scale and size of these bodies of water. And so these are from NOAA and other reputable sites, but San Francisco Bay is 550 square miles in terms of surface area. So if you took 1 inch of the San Francisco Bay and converted that to how many cubic yards you would have to remove to improve 1 inch, it's 47 million cubic yards of dirt or, bay mud that you would have to remove in order to offset that. And that even assumes that it's disconnected from the Pacific Ocean. So, generally a full size dump truck is usually about 10 cubic yards. So you can imagine 4.7 million loads of trucks just to reduce the amount of volume by 1 inch for San Francisco Bay. Again, not factoring in that it also is contiguous to the Pacific Ocean and all oceans. So just wanted to demonstrate that visually, and obviously happy to answer more questions on that.
Thank you, RJ. It looks like David has his hand raised. David, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute. Welcome.
Hi, great presentation. Thanks, team. That modeling is quite impressive. So kind of a dream question. Sometimes your residents have raised their houses. If you do substantial improvement to a residence here in your floodplain, you're required by permit to elevate the house. But the infrastructure and the streets are still at the same level. And as that one picture showed, Marina Village is really low or has settled a lot. And there's talk about, undergrounding utilities, primarily for our friends up in the hills for fire. But the utilities down here in Marina Village, as I say, are very ugly. Has any thought been, I guess my point is, has any thought been given to undergrounding utilities? And is that like not a good idea if we're going to get flooded? Oh.
Yeah, thanks, David. Right, so when we're talking about undergrounding, most often people are referring to like power lines and electrical undergrounding. And yeah, that is not a good solution in areas that have high amounts of groundwater or tidal influence. So, I'm sure as part of that process, even PG&E might say this isn't worth investing, or this is an appropriate use of it. Whereas if you're in higher areas with less groundwater, less concerns. But yeah, generally, we put storm drain pipes in the ground and other things because there's a need and a purpose there that makes sense. But yeah, mixing electrical facilities in areas that have the potential to be inundated with water pretty consistently is not going to be a long-term investment strategy that's worth doing.
Thank you for that question, David. Bob, I see your hand raised, so feel free. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. RJ is really that's a good way of looking at dredging and what that would actually do to improve capacity of San Clemente Creek or anything. And the only way that dredging could be beneficial was the way that it was dredged probably back in the late 60s or 70s. And according to one of the neighbors, Nora on Harbor, they put the dredge spoils up on the existing berm and built that back up. I don't know if we could do that now with BCDC and environmental concerns and such, whether you could scrape out the wetlands to build up the levee and, you know, temporarily disrupt that vegetation. But that would be the only benefit to dredging, being able to do something with the spoils. That this would probably be dredging with a big backhoe behind the houses.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Yeah, so I guess probably the most common application for dredging is really to, you know, increase depth for, you know, boating and other navigation, right? So you see it very commonly around different harbors and whatnot, so that boats can actually dock and not hit the ground. But to your point, dredging material is actually the type of material that you would or could potentially use to build up a levee. You wouldn't be using other materials that we use for like roadways and things that are more granular, because you want them to be impermeable to keep the water out. So yeah, you know, if we were to embark on a project like this, you know, given the costs of finding this material is high, we would really seek out projects that have opportunities for that type of material that is appropriate for levees.
Thank you again, Bob, and thanks, RJ. Looks like we had a question come in asking through chat, who and where would one learn about the priorities the town has for its residents? And examples were given were mudslides, wildfires, flooding. Just trying to understand, I guess, where those priorities lie in unison. I don't know, if RJ, if you want to take that on. I know it's not an easy
Yeah,
question.
I mean, really I mentioned the comprehensive and long-range document is the climate adaptation assessment. It was adopted in 2021. So if that's information you're interested in, I definitely would start there. We have, you know, built off a lot of those objectives since, you know, for instance, you know, some of them said further, you know, engage with our shoreline communities. So, you know, here we are doing that and kind of going through next steps. And some of the other things might be, you know, further evaluate undergrounding, and we're doing that as well. So on our Corte Madera Adapts webpage, we have 3 kind of separate tabs on our homepage. One is shoreline, hillsides, and central. And those are really kind of set up to, you know, monitor and present progress as we further develop things. So we've recently got authorization from council to improve evacuation routing and, you know, look at some undergrounding opportunities and fire risk for Christmas Tree Hill. So as that project moves forward, we'll be putting information in the hillside location. One of the other strategies that was listed in the climate adaptation assessment was to update the town's storm-wide storm drain master plan. So we're in year 2 of that, hoping to wrap that up here in the next 6 months, and that'll likely live in the central tab. So, but that's coming and potentially going to be presented at our next flood board meeting in April. And then after we get feedback on that draft plan, you know, we'll eventually take it to council for their comments and consideration. So, like I said, that original document, it was that comprehensive effort, and we're trying to proceed with a lot of those ideas that were in there. And, over time, we may have to update that climate adaptation assessment. But right now, I think there's enough strategies to go and pursue. And I think this is one of the top ones for consideration here at Marina Village, given the visualization tool that you all see and really the potential impacts that could occur.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I tried to drop a link in. I think I accidentally first dropped a link to the shoreline, but the second link I dropped in chat is to that homepage. They're all in the same place. But as RJ mentioned, there is a website dedicated to looking at all three of those efforts concurrently. Chris, I see your hand raised. Did you have something you want to contribute?
Yeah, I just also wanted to mention that we are in the process of adopting the new version of the multi-jurisdictional local hazard mitigation plan, which is a document that talks about hazards countywide and also for Corte Madera. So we just updated that, and that does have a lot of information about prioritizing hazards in town. So it's worth checking out as well.
Yeah, good reminder. Chris, can you drop that in the link or in the chat?
Yeah.
Just to remind you all where to go if you have any additional questions or comments. Definitely feel free to reach out to this email address, cmadapts@tcmmail.org. Or again, this website has all of the great information that was presented today. We'll also include this presentation will be posted to the website as well as that mapping tool. Yes, Bob, I see your hand raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Welcome back.
Yeah, I'd really want to congratulate everybody on a great presentation on this. This is very timely and very important. And I know RJ and Chris and others like myself monitor what are the predicted tides versus what are the actual tides. And just wanted to comment that when you monitor the NOAA site about what the actual tides are, when we have just not a 20-year storm, but just a regular storm, like we're going to have starting tomorrow, I guess, sometimes that can put a foot or a foot and a half on top of the predicted tide. And so it's just fortunate that we haven't had any of those with our king tides that we've had recently. So that's another site that you can potentially monitor that really gives you some real-time information on what the actual tide is.
Yeah, and actually I think that's a good point. Maybe Phoebe, if we can revisit some of the photos that we had in the presentation of those king tide events, and maybe Phoebe, you can talk us through the actual versus predicted tides. There actually were some increases compared to what we thought going into those events. And then responding to, looks like Dave had a comment about showing the mapping tools. So the one that we showed today, we're still fine tuning. Phoebe might be able to speak on when we might be releasing that publicly, but there is the Cosmos viewer, which is the kind of 2D version and less fancy version that is kind of the baseline for this exercise. And that is publicly available now. We can always share that.
Yeah, so Dave, are you asking about the collaborative mapping tool that community members can contribute to, or the flood visualization tool? You can unmute or put it in the chat. I think they might be asking about the mapping tool, which is live on our website right now. So any of the links to our website, it's right there on the homepage, and maybe we can pull that up and walk through it as well.
And then, yeah, Quentin, do you mind putting up the presentation? I think there's one of me bending over with a measuring tape.
Did you want to go back to the images in the presentation? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, I did.
Sure, I
just,
got you.
yeah.
I'll bring it up right here. There we go.
Because it was, it was actually a surprise to me because, here we are December 13th. It was a sunny day, no storms, but the 7.32 is the actual, but I don't believe it was predicted that high. Do you recall, Phoebe?
I can look it up right now. Let's see.
This one might not have been as significant. It might have been, okay, called for a 6.7. That's what Chris, our senior engineer is saying. So even on that, bright and sunny day, a little over half a foot more than predicted at that look, And then if you can also show the one from February.
Yeah, so that one, 11:20 a.m. was predicted at 6.7, and then it was actually a 7.3.
And just to be fully transparent, these are the tide levels at the Richmond gauge. So there's 2 gauges that are actively monitored close to us, one in Sausalito, one in Richmond. We don't have one specific to Corte Madera, but we use those 2 as our best data that we have. And so that's where that information comes from.
Yeah, so just put the link to that in the chat if anyone's curious about the NOAA station at Richmond.
And thank you for that, RJ. I'm happy to bring up the website just to show where that mapping tool is, if that is what indeed you were referring to, Dave. And I see you're unmuted if you'd like to let us know, but I'm happy to bring that up regardless. But before we do, it looks like Lisa also had a question in chat asking, has there been any input from any of the businesses that would also be considered at risk in the event of a higher flood?
We have reached out at times to various businesses. We definitely did as part of the climate adaptation assessment, and we had varying levels of interest. And then as part of this analysis, we were also trying to target some of those groups. So we'll continue to do so, but I don't know that we've had any noteworthy comments to share. So
Yeah, I can respond to that too. We have done some outreach to the businesses within these specific areas, and we might have a few people on the call tonight. But if you know of any businesses that are interested, please connect us, because we'd love to get that input as well. So that is one of our goals, is to not just hear from residents and property owners, but also businesses who are impacted by flooding impacts as well.
Great, thanks again for that question. I see another question coming in from Phil, asking, with respect to next steps, could the present value of cost over the time of various strategies be estimated and compared to the estimated cost of planned retreat?
What we heard loud and clear from our climate adaptation assessment is that our community is not interested in retreat, and we support that. So unless we heard overwhelmingly otherwise, that's kind of where we're at right now. So there will be a survey. It will talk about ways to approach this, but yeah, we were definitely told very strong and assertively that this is not the time to consider retreat.
Great, thank you for the question, Phil. Thank you, RJ. So I am going to just real quickly just bring up the project website just to show you all, if you haven't been there yet, how it's all set up and how to navigate to that map. So assuming I'm showing the right screen here, hopefully I am. So this is the landing page, the homepage that RJ referenced earlier, that shows the 3 concurrent efforts between the shoreline, the central area of Corte Madera, and the hillsides. So if you were to go here following any of those links that we had dropped in chat and click here to Shoreline, it'll take you to this base page, which I'm hoping to change and you all could see this now. And this includes some great information, some background information. Again, a lot of what was presented here today, obviously referencing these events that we're holding, has a host of information as well in resources, but right in the middle of the page, you'll now see this great mapping tool that, as was referenced to before, is a live map that it's basically set to the extents generally of the town, but more importantly to the shoreline communities that we've been referencing, for you all to be able to very simply zoom into any particular area that you would like to drop a pin, and there's pins referencing flooding, any general ideas or questions or places you want to leave a general comment. And it's as simple as grabbing one of these pins, dropping it anywhere you like on the map. This pops up, it allows you to leave a comment, it allows you to upload an image. If you would like, it's optional to put name and email, and then you simply click this add button. And once you do that, it does add a comment directly on the map, as you can see here, with a couple comments that have been added and images that have been uploaded that give you a sense of what the folks have been leaving or can leave on the map. These were kind of added in from some of the comments that we received to date. And then there's also this great activities button where you can very simply see all of the comments. And if you click on it, it shows where on the map they're referencing. So really handy and formative tool that we hope to keep up throughout the duration of this project to allow you all the ability to quickly leave us any comments or suggestions that are location specific, and then again, upload images to help feed as much information and input into this process as possible. So since we had the time here, I wanted to share that. And again, we will be sending this out in a larger email blast to the entire community so everyone knows that this tool is now live.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Dave. And it's also, the goal is for us as town staff to see your perspective and where you're seeing flooding impacts, where you're seeing vulnerabilities, because we're not in all of your backyards, to see what it looks like at different tides. So we'd love to, if you can, include, if you know the tide, or we have some links up above that link to that NOAA site where you can look up what the tide was at the time when you took the picture, so we can start to get an idea of what the water level is looking like during different events, or if there's a storm event and you know the rainfall, to include that information too. It'll just help us get a better sense of what some of the vulnerabilities are.
Thank you, Phoebe. Great. And thank you, Susie. Susie agrees. This is a cool interactive map. Thanks for that. It looks like another question came in. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing screen now. It looks like another question came in from David, asking what is the elevation of San Clemente and Echo Avenue compared to the 7.5 foot tide? For example, is Marina Village being protected by the levee and sandbags? RJ, I think you might be.
Yeah, so, we've done some targeted survey. So when we did the climate adaptation assessment, we looked at the LiDAR mapping that led us to, further analyze a couple of these what appeared to be low spots. So we had that low spot on the northern part of the levee surveyed officially at 8.3 feet elevation. That is not including the sandbags. So by putting in the temporary sandbags, that adds, I want to say, maybe upwards of an extra foot. But obviously sandbags will deteriorate over a certain amount of time. So that location potentially is protected up to 9.3 or so. But the part by harbor was kind of a more recent discovery for us. So something that we had not really seen with our own eyes, given you need access to private properties get there, but really appreciate the homeowners that invited us to stop by their event and take a look. So certainly the town would be interested in evaluating that further with, permissions and whatnot from those private owners. Assuming this is, again, the direction that people want the town to proceed and looking at solutions.
Yeah, and Dave was just sharing the elevation map there. So the elevation of San Clemente or parts of San Clemente and Echo Ave are about 6 feet or less.
Right. So yeah, that light blue, as Phoebe mentioned, is 6 feet or less. So that, that's in the vicinity of the roadway there, amongst other locations. But as you look in specifically the levee, you can see it's got some darker colors, different colors that represent higher elevations, which is why we have some protection.
Great. Okay, well, I don't see any other comments or questions coming in, and I just do want to let you all know we have been actively taking down all these great comments on a virtual whiteboard that I won't bore you with at this point, but Quentin's done a great job of tracking all that as well, so that we can take all this great information that we receive from you all and put together a very simple summary of this workshop as well, that we could then share out with everyone on the project website, so that we can continue to kind of build off of all this great information that we're hearing from you all and what we're sharing out. And yeah, and I just wanted to, again, give you space if you had any other comments or suggestions. If not, we'll let you go enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm just going to bring this up one last time to remind you to, again, let your neighbors know or join us on Wednesday, March 27th, where we'll hold a similar virtual workshop for the Mariner Cove area. And again, you can go to the project website to check out all the resources and leave us any comments or questions, and hopefully have some fun with that interactive mapping tool.
And
with
I'll make
that,
one more plug for our flood control board meeting. We're targeting discussion of the draft storm drain master plan. That's the second Monday of April. Maybe Chris can put that date up. And that storm drain master plan is really looking at our storm drain infrastructure and a lot of the inland precipitation. So really kind of gathering all the pieces now. We've had some understanding of tidal influence, but then also now having the inland infrastructure to add to it really gives us a more complete picture of our overall vulnerability. So please attend there and participate.
excellent. Looks like Chris did drop that information in chat. Great. Unless you had anything else, I just want to again thank you all for taking some time out of your evening to join us here. Really, really important to get your input as we move this process forward, and we look forward to seeing you at future outreach opportunities. So have a fantastic evening, and we'll see you soon. Take care all. I know.